Okay, well, the live button did not get pushed, but welcome. And we're just starting Sanhedrin chapter 3 in the Mishnah, and this will be our topic this coming year. I'm Rabbi Tobin at B'nai Shalom, and we welcome you. Okay, Mishnah chapter 3, Mishnah 1. Who would like to read?
English or the Hebrew?
English or Hebrew, whatever you like. The Hebrew is Dinei Mamonot B'Shlosha. Go ahead, English.
Cases concerning money matters are decided by 3 judges. One litigant chooses for himself, one judge and the other litigant chooses for himself, another judge, and 2 of them together elect for themselves one judge more. This is the view of Rabbi Meir.
Okay, pause. So we understand the system. Monetary court cases. So I say that Stan stole $20 from me, or Stan stole my tallis. I can't use this court for Stan stole my wife. And I can't do it for Stan killed somebody, God forbid, none of these things. Monetary issues. So we are in the section of the Mishnah, the order of the Mishnah, of the 6 orders, called Nizikin, which means damages. So this is roughly summarized the tort law section of the Mishnah, and this tractate follows 3 major tractates, Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, and Bava Batra, which are the first gate, middle gate, and last gate, which altogether were just called originally Bava, the gate, but it was so much Talmud, nobody could carry it around, so they broke it into 3 volumes. But Bava is the largest chunk of Talmud you'll ever see, and it's all tort law. It is followed immediately by Sanhedrin, the rules of the courts, right? So the courts, so now that you know what all the discussions are, that's what the court has to take into account. So now we're going to talk about how a court is constituted. So in monetary matters, like the ones that we've been reading about in Bava Kama, Bava Batra, and Bava Metzia, we have courts of 3. And they are selected by the litigants and each other. I pick a judge, you pick a judge, they pick a judge.
And can there be any relation between the litigant?
They haven't said that yet, but no, there can be no relation between the litigant and the judge, and there can be no relation between the judges and each other, presumably. But let's go on. Go ahead. That's the view of Rabbi Meir. By the way, Rabbi Meir against the Chachamim, usually he loses. That's just the general rule. Rabbi Meir against any other individual, he wins. Rabbi Meir against the Chachamim, he loses. So here we go. The Chachamim are going to say,
But the sages say the 2 judges choose for themselves yet one other judge. The one litigant may reject the judge of that is chosen by the other litigant, and the other may reject the judge of the former. This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir.
okay, hang on. So, but the sages say the 2 judges choose for themselves yet another. Isn't that exactly what we just had?
Yes.
Cases concerning money matters are decided by 3 judges. One litigant chooses for himself one judge, the other litigant chooses for himself another judge, and the 2 of them elect for themselves one judge more. That's the view of Rabbi Meir, but the sages say the 2 judges choose for themselves yet another judge.
So I have 4 judges on one case.
Well, you can never have 4 judges. Why?
Because
Because
it's
2
even,
and
it's
2.
an even number.
You need to have 3. Every single court is going to be an odd number, so when they vote, you always have an answer.
Jury also.
Yes, there is evidently a manuscript issue here, because the sages say, Rabbi Meir says, and the 2 choose for themselves a third, and the sages say, no, wait a minute, the 2 choose for themselves a third. Right, so you've got some kind of a manuscript issue going on here, but let's go on. And then the 2 judges choose from themselves. No, the litigant can reject each other's judges. So I chose Shmuel, and he chose Reuven. If he wants to declare Shmuel no good, he can do that. Have you ever sat in on jury selection?
Yes.
And each side says, oh, I don't like that one, and I don't like that one. They get to do that with the judge of the 3 judges. But that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. What do the sages say? Go ahead.
When one litigant can produce evidence against them that they are kinsmen or ineligible, but if they be eligible or fully qualified, he cannot object to them.
Okay, there you go. So you need to bring evidence, right? So that they're not related, good, and that winds up being related to anybody. And ineligible. What would make a judge ineligible? That's been the topic of America for the last 2 weeks. What would render a judge ineligible to be a judge?
Not knowledgeable, not Jewish.
Well, he's got to already kind of be a judge. What?
If the outcome of it could have a financial effect upon himself.
Okay, so he's ruling on the Stanley Sprocket Company, and he holds stock in Stanley Sprocket Company, right?
He may have a history of bad blood with the litigant.
Maybe he's got a previous court case with one of these guys, a personal court case, not where he sat as a judge over them. That might be one. Or it might come to terms that there's some kind of a moom in him. He's got a defective and a undesirable aspect to his person that has come to light that was not previously known or that has developed since he became a judge. So one of the things that will come up in this tractate is what makes somebody pasul le'edut, unfit, untrustworthy in testimony. And we are going to walk off the road a little bit when we get there, because there's one of my favorite categories, the mesachek bekubiot, the dice player, right? In New Jersey, they've recently legalized sports betting. And I sit here at the Kiddush on Saturday mornings, and this is now a conversation. People are betting on sports, and I have to, say, well, as a rabbi, is that the same as a dice player? Because they've had casinos in Atlantic City where they throw dice for years and years and years and years and years. Should I be asking witnesses at a wedding, do you play craps? Right? Are you a dice player? Does that make you unfit to sign this document? Would
How
that
would it make them unfit?
Well, that's what we're going to look at when we get there.
That's news to me.
Right, so there are things that a person may do that could render them unfit for testimony.
And who has to bring that up? The litigant
Well, the litigant who's trying to get rid of the judge would have to bring evidence of the thing,
against the judge?
right? And then some other Beit Din needs to determine whether or not that evidence is
That's a whole
trustworthy.
different court case.
It is a whole different court case.
Kind of like
It's
on the Court of
crazy.
Appeals.
They
and
never
everything.
get about the litigation.
Eventually, the lawyers will get paid.
But it's only one judge. In other words,
All right, so often in modern times, certain communities will say, well, I accept anybody who keeps kashrut or keeps a traditional Shabbat, and they'll judge those two things at different standards, perhaps not eating out, perhaps not driving. But that would split the Shomer Shabbat community, because there are Shomer Shabbat people who keep Shabbat, driving to and from synagogue only within the tshuva of the conservative movement, and other people would say, no, you can't. Right, so these always wind up degenerating into squabbles, and you're going to wind up really finding what are the norms for the community that you're a part of.
This could last forever.
Well, it has lasted forever, and we hope it continues to last forever. That's kind of the hope. The truth is, the reason that we have such diversity in Judaism today, in part, is because we do not have a Sanhedrin. Right?
If we did, there would be elements who wouldn't accept it.
And they would be taken out and flogged. The elements who don't accept the Sanhedrin would be flogged, and if what they do is spurious enough, they would be executed. So we don't have that authority to enforce the traditional law as determined by a Jewish court of law. There are people who might say, and ain't that grand?
Yes.
And then there are others who will say, the good old days. If only it could be that way, and we're certainly not going to let the people who should be flogged speak for Judaism.
Or excommunicated.
In a way, has the Knesset been like a Sanhedrin?
The Knesset has not been like a Sanhedrin at all, because the laws of testimony and the basis, it's not. It's not. Within the Shas party, within some of the very traditional Haredi parties, are things handled according to Talmudic law? I would certainly hope so. It would be consistent with the norms of that organization as they present themselves. But my point of view is Israeli society is a secular society. The imposition of any religion, even Judaism, upon that society is contrary to the essence of the founding of the state. That's my
Even after this last thing that came out about,
Even in
that.
even in an age of a basic law that names Judaism as the religion of a nation state, it doesn't mandate that be the imposition of the religious law of Judaism. It makes it the state of the Jews, right? It is a Jewish state. Its purpose is to be a homeland for the Jewish people. Its hope is to be a democratic state that does that. Inasmuch, what the nation-state law does, in my understanding, is that if push comes to shove in actual court cases and legislation where democracy versus Jewish identity of the state is in question, Jewish identity will take precedence. That's the purpose of the nation-state law. Notice that's a non-valued presentation of that. I'm just describing it. Right? Okay. Well, that's what it is. And that's not the only thing in that law, by the way. That's just the thing that gets all the press. There's like 13 points in the law. Okay, moving on, before bad things happen. Go ahead.
The one litigant may refuse to accept the witnesses of the other, and the other may object to admit the witnesses of the former. This is the view of Rabbi Meir, but the sages say, when does this apply? When one litigant can bring proof against them that they are near of kin or ineligible, but if they be eligible, he cannot refuse them.
Okay, so Rabbi Meir is quoted as saying something that would make no sense, if that's in fact what he was saying, which is, I can object to your witnesses. Right? So, well, you're not going to get very far in a court case where everybody can throw out each other's witnesses. So the sages come in this case not to overrule Rabbi Meir, but to say, no, he's right, only in the case that. Okay? So,
This is the Rabbi Meir who is Bruria's husband.
this is Rabbi Meir, who is Bruria's husband. This is Rabbi Meir, who is in the Elisha ben Abuya story. This is Rabbi Meir. Okay? So, let me ask you a question. Put your kind of historian, intellectual, academic hat on for a second here. In the way this Mishnah presents the interaction of Rabbi Meir and the rabbis, do you think Rabbi Meir is sitting in a room with these rabbis, or are these rabbis someone else, even at another time and place?
The latter.
Yeah, me too. I
What,
agree.
what makes you think that it's the second?
That he's not there personally.
That this is not actually him being outvoted in a particular
Well, I
session
think
of
the
Sanhedrin?
sentence, this is the view of Rabbi Meir, period.
Yep.
But the sages say,
Right.
sounds like a Gemara-like
Right.
jump in time.
I agree. I think the sages say in this case sounds like a Gemara-like jump in time. What's happening here is under Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the Mishnah is being put together, and they are acknowledging and venerating traditions of Rabbi Meir, who lived a generation and a half prior to them, and that the work of their Sanhedrin, or their rabbinic body since then, has subsequently clarified the law. And so the Chachamim Omrim is meant to be a presentation by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's people of how law has developed since the time of Rabbi Meir, or what the proper interpretation of Rabbi Meir is. Right? So they give great he's a venerable figure. They give great deference to him by including him the way they do, but they often include him to overrule him. Right? So Rabbi Meir is a problematic personality in that way, in that he is beloved and respected, and yet he is almost universally brought as a precedent to a Chachamim Omrim, the sages say. All right? Fair enough. So, what have we learned? Money cases are tried in a court of three. You can bring your own judge. The two judges that are brought are the ones who select the third judge, which makes the third judge the tiebreaker. So who has the real power? The judge who tips the court has the real power, right? The judge who tips the court. So it's the judge chosen by colleagues who winds up being the person.
Well, supposing two of the judges agree, and the big one that they voted for, that the two judges voted for,
Well, they could, right,
they
they,
disagree.
if the antagonists, if the judges representing the antagonists agree and the one they picked disagrees, yes, 2-1, they'll win. But if both sides agree, you don't have a court case. So you don't know how objective the judges are. There's some assumption here that the judges may not be objective. That's why you have the system of them picking a third judge. Right? Okay, and witnesses need to be brought, and witnesses can be contradicted if they are relatives or they are
Ineligible for some.
ineligible for some reason, and we haven't gone through yet why someone would be ineligible.
That's what you call nogea b'davar.
Yeah, I use the term nogea b'davar often. So anytime you should recuse yourself is when the thing is connected to you in some way, right? Nogea b'davar usually means I have some kind of benefit I'm going to derive from it, but it can also mean I might be a vindictive SOB bent on revenge, and I'm nogea b'davar. I might be destroying me and them in the process, but I'm nogea b'davar. So anytime you're involved in it, you're not allowed to speak to it, except as a witness or a litigant. You certainly can't be a judge.
We had that situation in West Harlem, long before you came, where we had a kosher restaurant, right in the same block of stores that had the dry cleaner and
Yeah.
the bakery was still open and the fusion place. It was a kosher restaurant, and it was a good kosher restaurant. And the Mored Asra, who you know of, so I won't mention his name, refused to give them an ensure that without we called it Mashiach Tamidi, someone sitting there the whole time. The restaurant owner said you can't afford it. And he brought in a document from Rabbi Tice from Elizabeth, where we had a kosher pizza place. And I read that letter. I read that document, a beautifully written letter. And it includes by Rabbi Tice saying, "Uyehudi ne'eman nikam lismoch alav." He's a loyal Jew, you can rely on him.
Right.
To which our local rabbi said, "Well, I'm the Muradas from that Tice." So he says to the guy, "Why don't you make the mashgiach your cashier?" And I thought to myself, is he nuts? The guy's gonna become the cashier. He's a nogea b'davar. His livelihood is dependent on that.
Right.
Didn't see that at all. And it put him out of business.
Yeah, so the question is, an example is given for those who can't hear online of a story of a kosher restaurant that was having trouble getting certification locally because it couldn't afford having a permanent mashgiach in the restaurant, watching him all the time. It's Jewishly owned, Jewishly operated. A well-known regional authority was willing to support the man personally without a certificate, but even that was overthrown, and the suggestion was made, well, why don't you use one of your salaried positions to pay the mashgiach and make him your cashier? And the question is raised, does that make the cashier nogea b'davar, compromised because he's invested in the financial outcome of the business when he is supposed to be certifying the food? I actually don't think it's bad that a mashgiach be, I mean, they have a system by which the owner is the trustworthy mashgiach timidi, right? The custom has become in this region that if the owner of the restaurant or the business is on premises all the time and is a member of the right kind of community, meaning usually the synagogue that the regional supervising kashrut authority is the rabbi of, if it's one of their own people, then they don't require a second mashgiach timidi to be there all the time. You don't need to pay someone else to be there because you got a guy from the right shul who's already there, and we know him, and he's all the things we'd want him to be, and so he's trustworthy. There's no one who is more compromised in the financial success of the business than the owner. And to have a regular system by which the owner himself or herself can be the Tamidi supervisor on a regular basis means there's no problem if you were to make the guy your cashier, because they're not going to be nearly as compromised as the owner would be, and the owner is reliable in some cases.
He can't be the mashgiach.
In that case, there must have been something there. The owner went to the wrong shul or something like that. That's because it's very common practice these days that if the owner is from the right shul, they count as their own mashgiach for the rabbis in that area.
They put a lot of people out of business.
But a lot of people out of business. Non-Orthodox people have a very hard time economically running a kosher establishment for this reason, because they are told you need to have a permanent mashgiach who is not you in the building.
Now, we had a problem here at this synagogue.
At this synagogue, we ran into trouble too, where we had, the same system was in place. The owner of the business was Orthodox and therefore was the mashgiach tamidit, and the supervising agency recognized that and put that into place. But it wasn't the local authority, and so you run into trouble. That's an old story, and it's not going to end anytime soon. All right, back to this. Mishnah 2. One litigant said to him, the other litigant. Okay, Bonnie, why don't you go ahead and read Mishnah 2?
Mishnah's gone. Where's Mishnah 2?
On page 4. Big circle 4. On the right-hand side.
I gotta find page 4.
The pages
Oh, I
go
got it,
1,
I
2,
got it,
3,
I got it.
4, 5,
I
and
got
then
it.
6.
Okay, Mishnah 2.
Yes.
If one litigant said to him, the other litigant, I accept my father as trustworthy, or I accept thy father as trustworthy, or I accept 3 herdsmen as reliable, Rav Meir says he may retract. But the sages say he cannot retract.
Okay, so hang on. So now I've got a court case, and let's say there was somebody says I stole their wallet at the wedding, right? Everybody in the room is a family member, right? Everybody in the room is a family member. How are you going to get a witness who's not a family member? Well, if let's say I'm accusing Phil of stealing my wallet at my son's bar mitzvah, right? Right? And Phil's father was there and saw him do it. And I know Phil's father is an honest man and is going to tell the truth in a court under oath. I'm going to say, you know what, Phil, it's okay. Your father is a kosher witness. It's fine with me. I can waive my objection that he's your relative and allow the testimony to stand. Okay? That's what the first statement says. Or, and I love this, I accept 3 herdsmen. Herdsmen are shepherds. And we're going to get into the issue of who is a witness and who's not a witness, who's a kosher witness, who's not. Just suffice it to say that shepherds are presumed thieves. And the reason they are presumed thieves is not because it is presumed that they steal anything. It is presumed that they graze their animals over other people's land without permission. And therefore they are thieves. And since they are presumed thieves, they are presumed not kosher witnesses. And here Rebbe Meir is saying, I can waive that. Again, if the crime happened in front of 3 herdsmen, I might want them to testify. Do I have the right to allow a non-kosher witness to testify? By the way, notice, if that were to happen, are they believable? Yes. Their testimony would stand up in court, even though they're in this category. So it's not that they're not telling the truth, it's just that they're not believable. All right?
I'm sorry.
Liars can tell the truth.
Well, that's what happened
Only
recently
lie
in the
about
same
their-
business with Kavanaugh. The ones who criticized Professor, what her name is,
Yeah.
Ford.
says, we don't deny that she believes what she's saying, but she's not believable.
Yeah, she seems erstwhile, what was the word? Compelling was the term. Her testimony is compelling. We just don't believe a word she says, right? As opposed to, you've got 2 sides. When somebody says it is and somebody says it is not, somebody is factually correct. Can they both be telling the truth as they understand it? Sure. One person might remember it, the other person not. One person might remember it wrongly, and the other person correctly. Those are your possibilities. There is no objective evidence to prove any of those cases, and so you're left reading body language through your own subjective prejudices about what kind of a person do you believe, and pretending like what you want the outcome to be isn't affecting your thinking. Right? Messy, 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 messy. It's not a court of law, it's a circus. Right?
I don't think they're both saying the truth, I think they're both lying.
They could both be lying. I didn't say that. I'm sorry. They could both be lying. True. All right. Odds are not everybody's lying when these things happen, but
The false memories are your memory.
eyewitness testimony is the worst form of evidence.
Goes over time.
What can
Well,
I-
you're right, Rabbi Meyer strikes out every time.
Rabbi Mayer strikes out every time. He may retract, the sages say he may not. So once you say the witness is good, why would you retract?
Good question.
You don't like what they said. I'm going to let them testify, and I can't believe they just said that. You know what? They're not kosher witnesses. You have to strike that from the record.
But there's no proof of that, just by saying they're not kosher witnesses.
Well, they're shepherds. Look at them.
In other words, they weren't supposed to be witnesses in the first.
Right. They're in
There's an exception to the
right.
rule, and now.
I'm going to let your father testify. Your father testifies. I don't like what he said, and now I'm going to say he can't testify. He's your father.
Okay,
Even after the test.
So Rabbi Meir says I can eliminate the testimony from the record, and the sages say I can't. Right? Once you give it, you give it. Or even from the time you said it was okay, he hasn't testified yet. He shows up in court, and I say, you know what, I take it back. I don't want to hear a word from him. Right? Rabbi Meir says you can do that. The sages say, nope, once you said green light, it's a green light. Okay? Okay, end of the Mishnah. If he had,
If one had to take an oath before his fellow, and the latter said to him, vow to me by the life of thy head, Rabbi Meir says he may withdraw therefrom, but the sages say he cannot withdraw. Keep going?
no, let's try and understand that for a second. Okay, so I'm going to take an oath before you, and probably, you know, let's say you come to me and you say, I have things happen in my house all the time between my kids. So with these squabbles, I always think of children, right? So I had a child who was building a case against the other children in the house yesterday, and was really working at piecing together all the circumstantial evidence. Well, this one was away for the night, and that one was out until this time, and this one was home but in the room, and I was gone from this time to this time, and when I came back, I found it like this. So the first person that he blamed was me.
You.
Well, you
Right?
are in charge.
The only person unaccounted for in his mind, so it must have been me, right? Because there's something that happened. At which point I say it was not me, and don't say the next sentence, which is accusing me of not telling you the truth, because that doesn't happen like this, okay? So stop it. So then he starts working through the circumstantial evidence again, and now it's got to be, and he comes up with who it is and going to go get that guy, right? I'm like, stop it. You just stop it. You just don't know. You don't know, and not knowing is not knowing. Right? You don't know. So in that case, the rabbinic system is that you bring those two people together. There's no proof. There's no witness. There's an absolute denial, right? I'm accusing you of this, and there's an absolute denial it's not me. So that person who is issuing the denial swears an oath
Ooh,
that they didn't do it. Remember, an oath is punishable by death.
bad
You
stuff.
swear an oath by God's name, it's taking God's name in vain, and you can be taken out and executed. So swearing an oath is quite a significant matter, right? So you don't do it lightly. So there's a secondary manner of getting people to swear oaths that's not invoking the name of God, and it's, I swear by whatever, right? And it's taken to be as serious as if, but you're not gonna, what if they're just wrong? What if they swore the oath and they didn't know that they actually were the one who did it? And then it comes out that they did it. And they say, wait a minute, when I picked that bag up, I did take your wallet? And they swore, or I thought it was my wallet, or I thought it was his wallet, but I took it, and I swore to blankety blank that I would, and on pain of death. So they don't want people in that position. So they have secondary oaths that are kind of like those, not so much. So what's happening here is the person is pushing the envelope on that secondary oath. Swear on the life of your head.
Life of your
Head.
Head.
That's what it says?
Are we talking about a monetary case?
Yeah, this is in the context, all this is supposing. So I'm swearing I didn't steal your $20. But by swearing by my life, I turn it into a capital offense if I'm lying, right?
If it's monetary, it's only money.
Right. So Rabbi Meir says you can withdraw from that oath because the other person presumably puts you under pressure to swear an oath that is not a permissible oath. Right? And therefore you should not be held to it, and it was under duress. Two things, not permissible and under duress. Both of those would cancel an oath. But the sages say, nope. Yikes. Yeah, very serious. So the fear of the Lord was in people in these courts, right? The idea of perjury, right, which is, from near as I can figure, basically seventh grade behavior these days, right?
The term perjury, people think is lie, it's not true. Perjury needs
It's
to
false
be
statement
lie.
under oath.
No, and it's more than that. It has to be something that would change the outcome of what you're looking at in the case itself.
It's intentional
It's
twisting of
intention-
justice.
It has to be also intentional, and it has to also be relevant to the case that you're dealing with, not something that's just a lie. Like if I.
So Ron is telling us that perjury is not just falsehood under oath, but it's falsehood under oath with the knowledge and intent of skewing the outcome of justice.
Yes.
That's perjury.
That is.
That's perjury in which system?
So it wouldn't hang on what the definition of is? That would not be perjury?
No, that's not, perjury is, it has to deal with the case at hand. Not
Okay.
just saying,
Right, and I try and remind people, over the last few weeks, I can't tell you how many times I had to say to people, lying is not against the law.
it's true.
Lying is not a crime. Crime is crime. If somebody's lying, they're lying. It doesn't make them a criminal. Right? It makes them a liar.
That's why Trump doesn't want to testify, because he can get caught in perjury.
I don't think I can ever say why Trump wants what Trump wants.
So what if he's lying about committing a crime?
Lying under oath is a crime, right? It's the Seinfeld episode. It's not a lie if you think it's true.
Yeah.
It's a mistake. There's a whole Seinfeld episode on that. Very funny. All right, back to this, Mishnah 3, and we'll wrap it up. All right, Phil, you want to read Mishnah 3?
If I can find it, I will. I see it.
Right below Mishnah 2.
I see it. These are they who are ineligible to be judges or witnesses. Dice player, and usurer, and pigeon flyers, and traffickers in sabbatical year produce.
Okay, I love this
You're
category.
saying it's a little-
This is just one of my favorite Mishnahs because the commentary on it just takes us to very real places. Who are ineligible to be judges or witnesses, Blackman has put in here. And by the way, whenever Blackman puts into parentheses something, 99% of the time, he's translating Rashi. The parentheses are Blackman's commentary, but he lifts his commentary directly from Rashi. So Blackman is really the Mishnah according to Rashi. Okay, which is 9 times out of 10 pretty
Nothing wrong
accurate.
with that.
Nothing wrong with Rashi, except when he's wrong. And these are they who are ineligible to be judges and witnesses. A dice player, what is a usurer?
Somebody who lends money at exorbitant interest.
Somebody who lends money to any Jew at any interest. That's the biblical definition of usury. A Jew who lends money to a Jew at interest is the limited definition of usury in the Bible, in the Torah, and you could say exorbitant interest is an expanded category no matter who you apply it to. So the question is really, what is it? Leave both of those things hanging in the wind. The sages will tend towards the first definition, that this is between Jews. Pigeon flyers.
What is that?
What?
My-
Was ist das pigeon flyer?
My husband's father raised pigeons, and you know, the Hasidim used to get the white doves and all, but they used these as messenger pigeons during the siege of Jerusalem.
Yes.
So even though he had smicha and could serve on a court, according to this, he couldn't?
No. He was fine. So there's pigeons are used for several things. First of all, pigeons want to fly home. Homing pigeons, they're basically extinct, so you can't use them anymore. But homing pigeons, you would raise them in a dove cote or a pigeon coop, And they had in the limestone caves, they have all these carved out little niches in the walls, and you can see them in some of the archaeological sites in Israel. Any place where you see a bunch of kind of rounded triangular holes in the wall in a cave, somebody had made that into a place to raise pigeons. And you would take the pigeon somewhere else and release it, and it would fly its way right back to its coop. People would use them to send messages in and out of a city in times of war. You would need to smuggle the pigeon in one direction and
Well,
put
not
the,
even at
and then
war, but
release
different
it.
Times when you needed, I think, the
Siege,
Rothschilds
war,
used them too at
yeah.
times,
Anytime, it was a great way to get stuff across a dangerous area. So people use them a lot for that. People use them as, there's a thing called flipping pigeons, where you have birds, if they're flying around and you make a big snap sound, they'll all go at the same time, and it's like a smoke signal. The people on the other side of town will see the and you do it again, right? And so there's different ways you can use pigeons for signaling. All of those are fine. None of those make you not kosher witnesses. A pigeon flyer, mafrichayonim, are the people who are using these for like horse racing. They're doing pigeon races, and they're releasing all the pigeons on one side of the field, and all the pigeons were raised on the other side of the field, and they all have numbers or owners, and people bet on them. And you release them and you bet on the pigeons.
It's not better than cockfighting.
It's a lot better. It's a lot better than any fight to the blood with animals in a pit. You don't want that.
What you're saying is a gambler, actually, is an eligible.
So the dice player and the pigeon racer are two different categories, but they're both based in gambling, maybe. And that's the stuff we're going to look at when we get to this point in the Talmud. We're going to look at Talmud, and we're going to look at Rashi, and we're going to look at
Aren't there
Tosafot.
any others? I mean, there must have been other forms of gambling in ancient times.
Well,
They
the
might have had card.
chariot-
They might have had card players. They had people probably bet on the chariot races,
chariot races.
Maybe
probably.
they're just using these as examples and of a category.
I don't think Jews engaged much in chariot racing. The Hippodrome wasn't really a place that the Sanhedrin was going to talk
No,
about.
I understand, but I don't believe that even in ancient times that there weren't gamblers, specifically since they call out two categories, pigeon flying and
Dice,
whatever.
craps.
I don't know. So it's dice players, usurers,
What do you mean
pigeon.
you don't know? You're the
I don't
rabbi.
know. Well, I told you my answer. You said, "Are there more?" You're asking me to give you a positive answer about a question regarding silence, right? It's an argument from silence. I have these two categories testified to. Were there others? It would seem reasonable, but I have no evidence of that, right? So it's an argument from silence. I have to say I don't
Those are
know.
probably the two most popular forms of gambling.
Could be, could be. I don't know why they're the only two here.
What
The-
other sabbatical years?
Sabbatical, and somebody who traffics in Shvi'it. So in the seventh year, you're not allowed to farm agriculture in the land of Israel. And if you do, you're breaking a Torah law. And the produce that you're selling, you do not have permission to sell. So it's another form of theft or crime.
Another form of what?
Theft or crime.
So is robbing a purse.
Well,
In other
sure.
words, the first two categories are gamblers. The third category is a theft, or a violation of
Right.
Jewish law, anyway.
Violation of Jewish law, right. Charging interest against
I'm
a...
not getting anywhere with you, am I?
Well, what I recognize is that it's given 4 specific examples, and your desire seems to be to have a complete list.
Right, no, my desire seems to have a common denominator.
Okay, so the Mishnah typically gives examples to provide differing categories. So for example, in the beginning of Bava Kama, it says there's Arba Avot Nezikin. There's 4 categories of damages, and it's the pit and the ox and the tooth and the fire. Those are the 4 categories. And then and every form of damage that you can do to another person's property is going to fall into one of those 4 categories. And then it says the pit and the fire are not like the tooth and the ox, which have life in them, but the pit and the fire have no life in them. And the foot, the ox, and the fire are not like the pit and the tooth in that they can move and cause damage where the others are stationary when they cause damage. And then you use those categories and those logical things to say, well, Union Carbide's factory released a gas cloud in India and it killed 1,000 people downwind in the town. Which is it? Right? Well, that's fire. It's a non-alive thing that was under somebody's responsibility that they let loose, and it went down, and it moved, and it killed people, right? So did they know about factories and gas clouds and Union Carbide? No, but they created categories that any form of damage can be fit within
Why
them.
do you assume they didn't know with all the scientists?
I don't think the rabbis knew about poison gas
Rabbis are
clouds.
talking about Union Carbide.
Oh, no, Union Carbide knew, no, they knew.
Yeah, let me say that the
Yes.
I think
category
the
from
common
where-
denominator that you're looking for here is that their actions are adversely affecting financially other people. All these
Yeah.
types of things can adversely affect financially. Dice playing, lose because the way the odds are against you. The usury, taking money too much. Pigeon flying, same idea. Trafficking, you're making money when you shouldn't be making money. So all these things,
Yeah.
you're trying to make money.
I agree. I think these are all areas of financial incentive, and the areas of financial incentive that people are likely to engage in, and the loser is likely to have entered into willingly. Right? I wanted the loan from you. I was willing to pay the interest. Right? There's,
I needed the loan.
but that's the problem. I needed it. So under Jewish law, you should have just given it to me. And not, right? So all of these are messy borderline cases. I think they would have been very common. They all have greed associated with them. And it's not the person who like knocked off a bank. They seem to be just like regular people, right? I think it's obvious that if this person's not kosher, then the serial bank robber is obviously not kosher, right? That kind of thing. All right, let's finish this Mishnah, and then we're done for today. Rabbi Yehuda said,
Rabbi Simon said.
oh, Rabbi Shimon, go ahead.
Said aforetime they used to call them gatherers of sabbatical year produce. But when the tax collectors increased it, they altered this term and called them traffickers in sabbatical year.
Okay. Notice the passage of time here and how the halachic category is adjusting to a secular power. So you have people who are tax collectors. What do the tax collectors do? They continue to demand taxes to be paid, presumably to Rome, on your harvest. So even if the harvest was forbidden to you biblically, Rome doesn't care. So I've got Shvi'i people out there breaking Shvi'i, and they're like, ooh, I can't testify in court. Don't care. I'm going to make a living this year anyways. And Rome is collecting taxes on them. And now the tax collectors are increasing, and something bad is happening, like maybe to everybody because of that. I don't know. And so what the rabbis did is the rabbis say, we're not going to outlaw the gatherers, we're going to outlaw the sellers. Why? They're decriminalizing the gatherers from the Torah law. Why? Because tax collectors have increased. What do tax collectors do? They beat down your door and force you to pay them. And if you haven't gathered and you have nothing to pay them, what's going to happen to you?
Get arrested.
Very bad things. So this is a time of economic forced situations where there's a duress that is forcing people to go out and gather their shvi'it in a way that ideally they would not do, so that they can pay these taxes, which ideally would not exist, and which are becoming very burdensome. So the rabbi shifted the criminalization of this to the people who are actually engaged in an economy of produce distribution and sale. The sellers of the Shavi'it. So the people who are loading trucks and driving them to supermarkets, those are the people who are breaking law. Those are the people who are doing it willfully and out of greed. And those are the people whose testimony will no longer be valid. But Joe Stump, who had to go out and gather his stuff because otherwise the tax collectors are going to take his cow, all right, we'll still believe him in a court. That's what's happening here under
So
Rabbi
the rabbis
Shimon.
decriminalized in Jewish law the idea of Shemitah.
Well, they, for the purpose of the person's testimony in court being kosher,
Ah.
they no longer put them in categories of people breaking biblical law.
Okay.
So, kind of, sort of, not really?
Yeah, but
It's a
that's close
softening.
enough.
It's a softening based on a secular reality, right? And you see the passage of time in the Mishnah. It used to be this way, it became this way, and we had no choice.
What do you think about people who use an elevated bed that is not in the ground to grow the?
So you grow, so hydroponic, how about hydroponics in a Shvita year? Completely kosher. There's no reason you can't do hydroponics in the land of Israel in a Shvita year. There's no law against it. It's not in the ground, it's not the land of Israel.
Right, so
You're
how-
growing stuff in water, and with nutrients, I mean, great.
They also have what, in buildings?
I really want to know if you go to Jordan and you bring a truckload of soil and you dump it onto, you're growing it in Jordanian soil.
Who's taxing
Many
the
of the Chagall and Haredi Jews who purchase an Arab
Yeah. You sell what they generally do now is they sell their farm to a reliable Arab partner during the Shvita year.
I'm talking about the Arabs with their farms. And there are markets in Hebron and Bethlehem and all that.
Right.
And I remember I used to go there.
Finish it off.
About how cheap everything was.
Rabbi Yehuda, because we're running way over time. Rabbi Yehuda. Phil?
Rabbi Yehuda said,
What-
when is this the case? When they have no other occupation except that, a prohibited one, but when they have some other, occupation, but not that, whereby to make a living, they are eligible.
Who thought that was going to say ineligible? Think about it. Rabbi Yehuda says, all these people doing these bad things, when is it that they're not eligible?
And they need to.
When it's their only means of livelihood. They are ineligible. So is he talking about the Rabbi Shimon case where people were forced by tax collectors, or is he talking about the 4 cases at the beginning of the... It's a classic Reisha Seifa argument. It makes no sense if he's talking about Rabbi Shimon. They were forced by the authorities to do something they didn't want to. They had no other way to survive, and now I'm not going to believe them. Makes no sense whatsoever. It's the top 4. Someone who's making his living as a dice player, as opposed to someone who's a doctor who goes and he gambles in Atlantic City on Sunday. Saturday would be another problem. On Sunday, right? Somebody went, they gamble, they have fun, they've got a little $20 account with DraftKings, whatever it is. They're not making their living that way. They're still a kosher witness. That's Rabbi Yehuda. So it's a classic what we call Reisha Seifa. Reisha means the first part of the Mishnah. Seifa means the second part of the Mishnah. The Talmud only asks about a first and a second part of the Mishnah when there's a third part of the Mishnah. And it'll call the second part of the Mishnah the end of the Mishnah, just to make it confusing. So they'll come in and they'll ask for Rabbi Yehuda, is he talking about the Reisha or the Seifa? Meaning, is he talking about the first or the last thing before himself? Is he talking about Rabbi Shimon? Makes no sense. Is he talking about the first 4? Makes all the sense in the world. Okay? Classical Talmudic argument. The Talmud will go on a little while about that. It's not going to clean it up as quickly as we did, but you see what we do. All right, next time we're going to finish Mishnah and we're going to start Talmud. I would like to beg your permission. Do you think that it would be disruptive to the class to not have class next week, but to be able to continue the week after? Is that too disruptive, or do you think we need to plow ahead every single week?
There must be a reason you want to keep.
There is a reason, and I'll tell you as soon as I click off the video.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so...
Where are you going? You going to Florida?